Good evening on this Wednesday, September the 6th, 2017, shortly after 9:20 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And all eyes remain on Hurricane Irma, and rightfully so. As we look at infrared imagery here, you can tell how well defined and how well ventilated the system is. Certainly a very menacing looking system with a well defined eye. You can see straight into the ocean through this infrared view. Uh, and it's currently sitting just north of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico seems to they definitely dodged a bullet with Major Hurricane Irma, still a Category 5. Most of the more severe impacts went to the north of the island, but the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, islands back here like Barbuda, Antigua, Anguilla, not so lucky. Some pretty sobering reports of extreme devastation there. Not able to see the full scope, of course, because of not the best infrastructural communication. Um, Reports coming in that it's hard to get information from those islands to see if what the full scope of the damage is, but likely a very devastating situation there. But focusing on where the storm is now, it's not done. Its path is still yet to be determined, and there are people that's in its way, so we have to continue watching it, continue monitoring it to see where it's going to go. So if we look now, like I said, just north of Puerto Rico here, the island of Puerto Rico, and I checked some of the airport observations, not where I wanted to go, here we go. Some of the airport observations from Luis Munoz Marin International Airport, Puerto Rico, and was looking at some of the wind gusts to see what kind of impacts they're feeling on the island right now. These are 5-minute observations from this airport here located in San Juan, and you can see sustained winds of 39 miles per hour, gusts to 49. They had a gust of 63 not long ago, a couple of higher gusts, 61, 60. So they're definitely feeling the impacts, but they've definitely dodged a bullet. A very populous island, obviously dodged a bullet with major impacts from Hurricane Irma here. It looks like our satellite's reloading here, so we'll come back to that. But they definitely dodged a bullet here. But if we look at where the storm's at now, here's another infrared satellite loop showing that it's starting to gain latitude now. The storm's starting to go over west-northwestward, instead of going on its westward track that it was maintaining overnight, which is certainly it was expected. It was expected to go north of here. Certainly good news for Puerto Rico, avoiding that impact. And it looks to have the Turks and Caicos Islands right over here in the southeastern part of the Bahamas in its sights now. Looks to be heading directly for there. So hopefully preparations there are wrapping up. You see Cuba out here in the far west part of here. So all of this leading up to the potential for a U.S. mainland impact. And if we look at a couple of parameters here that we can use to gauge what's in its future, this is a map of ocean heat content. So not only the surface sea temperatures, but the overall depth of the column of the ocean. How warm is that? And these warmer hues here, the units are actually joules per meter squared, or in some cases kilojoules. But the main takeaway here is the warmer the hue, the more energy the ocean has. The warmer and the more deep that warm layer is, allowing the hurricane to really intake that moisture and just continue to blow up and potentially get stronger if this hurricane could even get any stronger. But it's certainly possible as it moves over these more energetic and more heat-filled waters. So the moisture and the heat and sea surface temperature variables are certainly there. And if we take a look at wind shear here, this kind of a busy-looking map, but what we're seeing here is anywhere you see these green contours inside of here, 10 meters, 10 knots, 5 knots, 15 knots of wind shear. These greens represent favorable locations that the storm's not going to get blown or tilted over. It's going to remain its vertically stacked column, which allows it to further strengthen. Unfortunately, that area of favorable shear happens to be in the direction it's going up here, like I just showed in the previous diagrams, southeastern Bahamas, and here is Florida over here in this top left part of the image. And this shear will obviously continue to move with the storm as the day goes on. Pockets of shear will open up and develop up here as the storm continues on its path. But the main takeaway here is that there's nothing impeding this system from maintaining its maximum potential strength. It's already maxed out, reaching 185 mile per hour sustained winds. No tropical cyclone on the planet has maintained that intensity for that long. There have been more intense tropical cyclones, but they have not maintained that peak intensity for the length or the duration of time that Irma has so far. Certainly a record-breaking storm, and puts it in perspective of how dangerous this storm is as it approaches the U.S. mainland. Another bit of history, as we keep going on here, historic storms. We have 3 active hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin right now. We have Katia, Irma, and we have Jose. all which have developed into Category 1 Hurricane Katia and Category 1 Hurricane Jose and Category 5 Hurricane Irma. The last time we had 3 active hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin was actually on, let's see, September 16th and 17th, 2010. And peculiar enough, those are actually Hurricane Carl, Hurricane Igor, and Hurricane, I think it was Julia. So it was also the I, J, and K names in 2010 that maintained those names. So that's certainly an interesting little tidbit there. But Jose is expected to curve back out to sea, and Katia maintains a southwest track, into mainland Mexico. So those are not immediate concerns. What is an immediate concern is Irma as it moves over these warmer ocean waters and approaches the peninsula of Florida and the U.S. mainland. So if we go here and look at the most recent track for Irma, this was updated, I believe, 8 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time. And what you're seeing, it's still moving along at a good clip, 16 miles per hour, with its maximum sustained winds at 185 miles per hour. Still an extremely powerful and dangerous storm. This M in the cone represents major hurricane. So as you can see, Category 3 or above represents that major status. And it's continued to maintain that status as it approaches Florida and the U.S. mainland. And what you need to remember here in this forecast cone is that this represents any area that the center of the storm can lie. So don't focus so much on connecting the dots here and the storm following that, but you need to remember that the storm could end up here. The center of circulation could end up here, or it could make landfall in the Florida Keys. It could clip parts of Cuba. It could go over some rough terrain and make a little jog into the Dominican Republic overnight tonight and into tomorrow, over the Bahamian Islands. It's really, you have to, there's a percent error that we calculate into the cone, the forecast cone that the National Hurricane Center releases, and people will usually get caught up in connecting the dots and saying it's going to go straight on that path. It's going to make landfall right where this M is located in Florida. Appears to be just north of Miami. But you have to remember that this cone represents anywhere that the center of circulation can land. So anywhere within this cone needs to be worried about the worst impacts. But obviously the storm is 400, 500 miles wide in diameter away from its eye. So impacts, really, you should have an alternative cone here that shows where all the impacts could go. The tropical storm force winds, the rain, a very wide-reaching impact. So we have to keep that in mind as it goes, that the impacts from the storm are going to be very wide-reaching, regardless of where in this cone it is. So if we go to look at a couple of the steering mechanisms here, and this is the GFS model and the Euro model, and if I toggle back and forth, you can see that they're initializing about the same, meaning that a lot of National Weather Service forecast offices out in the Midwest have launched weather balloons, radiosondes, getting upper air data to sample this trough we have here, which is this dip. These lines of concentric dips represents a trough in the upper atmosphere. And we're looking at 500 millibar height, so about halfway up the atmosphere, or the troposphere, excuse me. And you can see that they're initializing, they're starting about in the same place, which is good because that means that they're picking up the same conditions. And you don't see Irma yet because this forecast hour, this Irma is still 4 or 5 days away, 3, 4, 5 days away from making a U.S. Potential U.S. landfall, having U.S. impacts. So as you can see, it's good that they're initializing, and if we step forward in time here, you can see this trough we have here, and out over the ocean we have this huge area of high pressure which rotates clockwise, which is propelling. If you imagine a clock spinning here, it's propelling Irma down here, pushing it westward. And the original thinking back several weeks ago was that this trough was going to pick Irma up and sweep it out. But a lot of complicated dynamics come into play, and that's not the case. So if we continue to step forward in time here, here's Irma, this bowling ball of low pressure down here, and this trough that was there kind of erodes and doesn't have enough potency left in it to push Irma away. So what ends up happening is that Irma goes on its own pace, and then what develops around here is a little shortwave, a little kind of kink we have in the lines here. So the trough has gone away, but there's a little bit of disturbance in the upper atmosphere and kind of absorbs Irma, and Irma gets pulled inland around the South Carolina-Georgia border after clipping, maybe making landfall, maybe not making landfall in parts of eastern Florida. That's just the most recent snapshot, the most recent picture from the Global Forecast System American model. If we switch over to the European, much of the same. The time steps are at greater intervals here. so it jumps a little bit more, but Irma gets pulled into South Carolina, Georgia. So what this is saying, what does this mean? This means that Irma's continued path toward the west-northwest general direction tends to continue, and then that looks like it's going to take it towards the east coast of Florida, and then it's going to ride up the coast and maybe turn back into Georgia and South Carolina. But what to remember here is that there are still several ensemble members, lots of models running that have it completely different solutions off by a couple tens of miles, which can have huge impacts in the long-term forecast. So if this, if Irma decides to not turn when it was supposed to turn, when it makes this northward, jog here, when exactly is that turn going to occur, will have major impacts down the road in who gets the most rain, who gets wind, who gets storm surge, things like that. Will it make a U.S. landfall? Will it go back out to sea? Those are still possibilities, but you have to be prepared because the storm can still, fall anywhere outside of that cone. This is 33% chance that the center of circulation will fall outside of that forecast cone issued by the National Hurricane Center. So it's imperative that you prepare and you get your survival kit ready here. As I've put a little quick list, a condensed list from the National Hurricane Center preparedness website. Make sure you have your bottled water, a source of fresh water, non-perishable food in cans, first aid kit, medication, stock up on your batteries. Wind up weather radio is great because you don't have to rely on batteries or electricity to do that. Flashlights, whistle, noisemaker if you're on the coast and you feel as if you're at risk of, debris. The main point of the whistle is if there was some kind of debris or a collapse and you needed to be rescued, you could provide a source of sound to help someone rescue you. But hopefully that would not happen because you would evacuate in time. I'm going to release another video tomorrow that explains more of the evacuation and what to do if the threat came, but I'm just kind of giving a very general synopsis going on about, looks like 12 and a half minutes now. So just kind of giving a general synopsis, but power stick and gas propane, you can grill out if you still don't have electricity, with power outages being a main problem in South Carolina, North Carolina, with gusty winds and rain if Irma does come inland. So lots of facets, lots of factors to the forecasts here, just to make sure that you're ready. And I have another slide here, but I don't really think it's worth showing, just to the link of this video. But the bottom line, the takeaways here are that Irma is an extremely powerful hurricane. It continues to move west-northwest. And if it continues on that track, which it is forecast to do so, the east coast of Florida, the South Florida, east coast of Florida, southeast coast of the United States needs to be on a very high alert for potential tropical impacts, whether that be storm surge, whether that be flooding, gusty winds to damaging winds to a point, depending on how Irma holds together. Currently forecast to weaken in emphasis air quotes, to a Category 3, so still a major hurricane, but I feel like the effects of the system will be felt very far inland and far away from just the coast. This is a very far-reaching system, and it has to be taken into account that as this storm continues to go, it's probably going to swell in size a little bit, just due to the dynamics, how the storm's working. So lots of different factors going into here, and I know this video is running pretty long, so I'm going to cut it off here in just a moment, but what to remember is just there's lots of factors in this forecast. Prepare for the worst. If it happens to miss, you're prepared for the next event. And heed forecast well. Follow official forecast. Lots of misinformation being spread, especially in the wake of Hurricane Harvey. So just be aware of all of that. And I'll post another video tomorrow clarifying a few things in a much shorter manner. And we will see where Irma decides to go and how to prepare for the impacts. And I hope that everyone stays safe and makes smart choices. And I'll have another video, like I've mentioned, a little shorter, more condensed, a little more focused tomorrow on impacts and specific evacuations or things like that to do with Hurricane Irma. But just be safe, be smart, and I'll look forward to seeing you on another video. Thanks.